Hey guys, Brent Hull Build Show, travel channel for master builders. Come join me. I went to Richmond, Virginia. Check it out. A lot of cool stuff. Things for you to do when you travel. Okay, so I went to Richmond, Virginia. I've got Master Builder University coming up. How did the builders of the past learn? How did they get better? In the early 1800s, there weren't very many books they could use. And so there was no Instagram, there was no, HGTV, right? Thank goodness. But how did they learn? Travel was one of the big things that they do. Looking at books, but certainly travel was a big deal. It influenced Thomas Jefferson. And speaking of Jefferson, I was in Richmond. Now, Richmond is the kind of the new capital of Virginia. A lot of cool stuff going on there. A lot of incredible history. And so I'm going there for a wedding. Here's what I went to look at. Here's what I kind of checked out and did. And I think came away from it really excited, encouraged, enlivened, learning a bunch of stuff. Whenever I travel, one thing I'm doing is I'm just kind of Googling historic houses in that area. So I Google historic houses in Richmond and like, what can I see? Now, one thing I'm interested in looking at is I go to the East Coast. Remember in Fort Worth, our housing stock is late Victorian. So we don't have any Georgian or Federal or Greek Revival houses. And so I'm excited to see those things, right? So I'm looking at historic houses. I see the Stuart Lee House, which is the Greek Revival house. I see Edgar Allan Poe is there. There's a place called Agecroft. And then there's the Money Lode, which is going out to Montpelier, which is James Madison's place. Now, all these things are fun. First day I get there, I go see this great Greek Revival house. Noticing on this house how strong that entry is. The columns that sit right down on the pedestal. There's no base in those columns. Notice that there's the architrave and the frieze are just kind of blocky and square. There's 3 steps. The proportions are wonderful, but that's a really handsome Greek Revival house. Very simple. Lee was only there for a few months after the war. It's a special place. Another fun one was the Edgar Allan Poe house. Now, the oldest house in Richmond is there. It's a stone house. Really interesting details, really interesting lintel over top of that door. If you look at that lintel, it's kind of crude. And so this is an early 1700s house, very early settler's house. And when you compare it to Poe's house, especially his library and thing, where it has a really pretty pediment over top of that door, there's some cool things there that you can see this difference and how something crude that was done 50, 75 years earlier is refined and beautiful by the late 1700s. Very cool. The other thing I found was this really cool house called Agecroft. Now, remember, 1920s is a period revival movement, right? There's English revival, Mediterranean, French, colonial, right? That's the period revival era of 1920 to 1940. The English Tudor period is most popular in the 20s. Now, what this owner did, which is a really brilliant idea, is he got inspired by the English styles and he really wanted to build even an English village inside on his property there in Virginia. He goes, you know what? I'm not just going to build a, period revival house. I'm going to go buy one. So there is a 14th, 15th century English house in England. It was a manor hall, right? A very early house that was built in England and lived there for a long time. One of the early owners was a wool merchant. And so they raised sheep and they were wool merchants. So they're very wealthy. Into the 1800s. And this house in England, okay, you ready for this? Was 60,000 feet, okay? 60,000 feet in the early 1800s. It's a massive building. I mean, that's massive, okay? So it goes into disrepair. The Industrial Revolution happens. There's coal underneath the house, and the house really gets destroyed because they're mining just directly under the house. They weren't living in the house at this period. Well, he buys that house and he goes and brings it back. And look at the fun details on this house, guys. There is lead guttering that came down. Look at the size of the roof. Those tiles on that roof are 3 feet wide, 2 feet thick. I mean, think about laying almost flagstones on your ceiling. The roof was just massive. The organization and the carving and the timber work and everything that was going around in there was magnificent. So it's really a special house, all leaded glass windows. Notice no double hungs in that period, all steel leaded glass windows. And then of course the interiors are magnificent. There's paneled walls and those Tudor and Jacobean walls. You saw my tavern video. You saw us putting that English woodwork together. This was really cool because this was so crude in some respects. It was so, if you look at the way the panels fit together and the wood, I mean, there's real texture there, and there was pegging. Each room was a little bit different. The timbered ceilings were different. That staircase is unbelievable. So much fun stuff to see there. And the Virginia house, which is next door, was the same architect and another English house, Elizabethan period, that had been torn down and brought over to America. So they did that twice there. It's really amazing. Fun stuff to see if you want to see that authentic looking thing. The final deal was we went to Montpelier. Now, Montpelier was James Madison's house, and there's some details in this house that are just magnificent. Fun tour. And again, it was nice for me to see because this is a 18th century house that Thomas Jefferson helped James Madison do. Now, if you read Thomas Jefferson's book, The Architect, it was the discovery of how Fisk-Kimball figured out that Thomas Jefferson really was a very influential architect in that region. And the Jeffersonian architect that you see at UVA campus, that you see at Monticello, that you see there, was his infusion into design in that area. So these are very early colonial houses. Now, I go there looking to see Thomas Jefferson's fingerprints on this house. Now, I could be completely wrong, okay? But I did find out that the portico that's on the front of this house was added later, okay? That to me is clearly, when you see Thomas Jefferson's, the state capitol in Virginia, when you see Monticello, when you see UVA's campus, these temple fronts that go out, I believe that Thomas Jefferson had a strong hand now. Now, I asked the curators about that there, and the problem is, although they know there's an association, there is no evidence of drawings. They don't have any drawings from his hand. They don't have any letters that say, Thomas Jefferson told me to do this. And so we're left to speculate. But there's some fun things in there. I mean, that portico, the entry is really cool. And if you'll notice on the entry, there's a picture there that shows that wood side light actually slides in and out. And so that would have been a working way to move air through that house. As you see that front entry, those side lights were meant to slide into the pocket. And that picture I'm showing you there actually shows that window sliding into the pocket. So a bunch of cool stuff, the moldings, the doors, all the architectural details, the outbuildings. There's a strong emphasis on the slave quarters, and so they're talking about the slaves' lives and things. Those buildings are wonderfully and beautifully crafted and put together. But, I look through these pictures, and this is inspiration for me. This is stuff where if I want to know how to do a gutter that's really cool, I can look at that English gutter when we do a Tudor Revival house and know that I've got some great details. What did leaded glass look like? What does a paneled wall look like in these different eras? And so now I'm filling up my brain with ideas and thoughts. I've taken a ton of pictures showing all these fun things, but this is how we get better as builders. The architects, okay, they're traveling all the time. We as builders need to be traveling as well so that we can be inspired to build better, to build more beautifully. And when you stand in those spaces and you go, ooh, I don't know why I like this, but I like this, you start noticing the molding, start noticing the proportions. It's really special and cool. I'm Brent Hull. Thanks for watching.